The Young and the Restless. Spoilers full episodes. Recap, Monday the 16th of March 2026. While waves of tension silently spread through Genoa City, a perilous journey began in the distant and alluring city of Las Vegas. Two men, driven by differing motives but bound by a common goal, decided to step into the heart of a dangerous web they knew could devour anyone unsuspecting. Nick Newman and Adam Newman were no strangers to power struggles, conspiracies, and family wounds, but this time the sense of danger was different. Their destination was a man accustomed to disappearing into the shadows whenever trouble arose. That man was Matt Clark, a man who had repeatedly escaped justice and left behind a trail of consequences that cost many dearly. The flight to Las Vegas was shrouded in a heavy atmosphere of unspoken thoughts. Nick gazed out the window as the city lights gradually appeared below, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew Matt Clark wasn't the type to be easily cornered. In the past, Matt had proven that he always had a backup plan, always an escape route. What worried Nick wasn't just the possibility of Matt escaping again, but the feeling that things could get worse before they had a chance to control the situation. Adam, sitting beside him, was suspiciously calm. He understood Las Vegas in a way Nick could never understand because the city was intertwined with a period of Adam's life that he rarely spoke about. The casinos, the private rooms, the shady dealings behind closed doors, all were part of the world Adam had entered and exited without ever truly being destroyed. Therefore, when Nick suggested that Matt might have disappeared before they could reach him, Adam simply shook his head and said that Matt wouldn't have gone far if that woman was still there. The woman was Riza, a name Nick had only heard before, but Adam knew all too well. Riza had been Adam's gambling partner during his turbulent years when he wandered between high stakes and risky deals. She was intelligent, shrewd, and possessed such a strong survival instinct that many who had underestimated her paid the price. Adam believed that if Matt Clark was hiding in Las Vegas, Riza was certainly connected. Not because she was loyal to Matt, but because Riza always knew where money and opportunity converged. For Adam, finding Riza wouldn't be a difficult task, because in the world of professional gamblers and powerful players, connections rarely truly disappear. They just lie dormant until someone knows how to awaken them. After arriving in the city, the two brothers quickly entered a large hotel where neon lights reflected on the glass walls, as if the entire city were living in an unending dream. Nick felt the atmosphere was unsettling. It was too noisy, too chaotic, and too easy to forget what was really going on behind the fake smiles. But Adam moved through the space with familiar confidence. He knew who to talk to, where to ask questions, and more importantly, who to avoid. In a private room behind the casino, Adam began calling old contacts. Names that had vanished from his life suddenly reappeared in his contacts, and with just a few clever words, Adam began gathering small pieces of information. Nick watched his younger brother work and realized that Adam was truly on his side. This was a world where Adam wasn't an outsider, not the always suspected son of the Newman family. Here, Adam understood the rules of the game. Finally, Adam turned and said they were one step closer. Riza was in the city and someone had seen her in a private card room just hours before. That almost confirmed that Matt Clark wasn't too far away either. Nick heard this, but his anxiety didn't disappear. He knew Matt Clark wasn't the type to wait to be caught. If Matt knew they were coming, he might have prepared a different game. Adam seemed to read Nick's mind and said that this was precisely why they needed Riza. She would lead them to Matt, and once the meeting was arranged, the rest would be up to Nick to decide. Adam had no intention of interfering with how Nick dealt with Matt. However, even though Adam seemed confident that everything would go smoothly, neither of them truly believed this trip would end easily. Las Vegas was a place where secrets were traded like steaks, and Matt Clark was the type who always found ways to turn the tables at the last minute. While Nick and Adam were cautiously navigating the dangerous labyrinth, another storm was brewing in Genoa City, this time stemming from a truth many found unbelievable. Nikki Newman had begun to feel. The air in the Newman Ranch study was thick with an icy, suffocating tension. Nikki Newman stood by the grand fireplace, her fingers gripping the edge of the mantel so tightly her knuckles blanched white. The portrait of her husband, Victor Newman, loomed above her, a constant reminder of the ruthless, unyielding man she had married, divorced, and married again. But tonight, the man in the painting felt like a stranger. Or perhaps, she thought bitterly, he was exactly the man he had always been. Victor's casual, almost arrogant admission that he had orchestrated Jack Abbott's kidnapping and had him on ice had shattered whatever fragile peace existed between them. Nikki's fury was a living, breathing entity in her chest. She paced the length of the Persian rug, the click of her heels echoing in the cavernous room. She would not allow Victor to play God with Jack's life. Not again. Not after the horrors of the Marco Annicelli debacle years ago. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Victor's security detail was loyal to him, but Nikki had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of Newman Enterprises. She knew exactly where the cracks in his armor were. She picked up her phone, dialing a burner number she kept for emergencies. The man on the other end was an unexpected source, a disgraced former Newman pilot named Elias, who had been quietly demoted to overseeing private charters out of the Genoa City Marina after crossing Victor. Elias owed Nikki. She had secretly paid for his daughter's medical treatments when Victor ruthlessly cut off his benefits. "Elias, Nikki," said her voice dropping to a harsh, commanding whisper. "I need the manifest and the GPS coordinates for the luxury yacht Victor chartered under the Shell Corporation. Don't tell me you don't know. You track everything that leaves those docks." A heavy sigh crackled through the receiver. Mrs. Newman. Mr. Newman would have my head if he knew I was looking into this. Victor is not the one asking Elias. "I am Nikki," demanded her tone laced with the kind of aristocratic authority that brooked no argument. "Where is Jack Abbott?" There was a tense pause followed by the clacking of a keyboard. "It's a vessel called the Times, Sea Siren Times," Elias finally muttered. "It's anchored in a secluded cove about 50 nautical miles north of the city. But Mrs. Newman, there's something else. The manifest. The primary passenger listed alongside the captive isn't one of Victor's usual muscle." "Who is it?" Nikki asked, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. "Patty Williams." The name hit Nikki like a physical blow. Patty Williams. The woman was dangerously unstable, a ghost from Jack's past who had wreaked havoc on Genoa City time and time again. The idea of Jack trapped on a boat in the middle of nowhere with a woman whose obsession with him had repeatedly crossed into lethal territory made Nikki's blood run cold. Victor hadn't just kidnapped Jack. He had handed him over to a madwoman. "Send me the exact coordinates immediately," Nikki ordered, hanging up the phone before Elias could say another word. She stood frozen for a fraction of a second, the gravity of the situation washing over her. She had to act, and she had to act fast before Victor's twisted game ended in tragedy. Across town, the Genoa City Marina was shrouded in a damp, chilling fog. The rhythmic clanking of rigging against metal masts was the only sound cutting through the heavy silence. Kyle Abbott stood at the edge of the pier, his jaw set in a rigid line of frustration and despair. Beside him, Diane Jenkins Abbott wrapped her trench coat tighter around her shivering frame, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with a fierce maternal determination. Billy Abbott paced furiously a few feet away, his phone pressed to his ear, arguing with a private investigator who was coming up empty. "We have the name of the yacht we know. Patty rented it, but the Coast Guard is giving us nothing," Billy barked, slamming his phone into his pocket. "It's like the damn boat vanished into thin air." "We can't just stand here," Diane said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed panic. "Jack is out there with her. You know what Patty is capable of, Billy. You know what she did to Summer. What she did to Victor. She's completely unhinged." Kyle placed a comforting hand on his mother's shoulder, though his own eyes betrayed his terror. "We will find him, Mom. I swear to you." Suddenly, Kyle's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning at the caller ID. "It's Nikki Newman." Diane scoffed a bitter, venomous sound. "Don't answer it. She's probably calling to gloat on Victor's behalf." "No," Kyle said, his instincts telling him otherwise. He swiped to answer. "Nikki, what is it?" "Kyle, listen to me very carefully." Nikki's voice was breathless, urgent, stripping away any pretense of their usual societal pleasantries. "I know where Jack is. Victor is behind this, but things have escalated far beyond his control. Jack is on a yacht called the Times Sea Siren Times, anchored in a cove 50 miles north. I'm sending you the exact GPS coordinates right now." Kyle's eyes widened, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Nikki, why are you telling me this?" "Because your father's life is in danger," Nikki replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Kyle Patty Williams is on that boat with him. You have to get to him before she does something irreversible. Go, now." The line went dead. Kyle stared at the screen as a text message illuminated the glass, displaying a string of numbers. He looked up at Diane and Billy, his expression transforming from despair to pure adrenaline-fueled resolve. "We have the location," Kyle announced, his voice slicing through the foggy night. "Nikki gave it to me. It's Patty. She's got him on a yacht 50 miles north." Billy didn't waste a single second. "I've got a speedboat fueled and ready at slip 4. Let's move." The twin engines of Billy's speedboat roared to life, violently tearing through the tranquil waters of the marina. Kyle took the helm, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The boat surged forward, cutting a jagged white wake through the dark, churning waters of Lake Michigan. Diane sat in the passenger seat, the icy wind whipping her hair around her face, stinging her cheeks. She barely felt the cold. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of terrifying scenarios. Jack, her Jack. The man she had fought so hard to reclaim, the man who had forgiven her past sins and built a new life with her, was currently at the mercy of a woman who had spent decades harboring a psychotic obsession with him. Diane's stomach churned with a sickening mixture of fear and rage. She knew all too well the depths of Patty's delusions. Patty believed Jack belonged to her. In Patty's twisted mind, Diane was the interloper, the villain keeping her from her true love. "Can this thing go any faster?" Diane yelled over the deafening roar of the engines and the crashing waves. "I've got it redlined," Billy shouted back from the stern, his eyes scanning the pitch-black horizon through a pair of night vision binoculars. "We'll be at the coordinates in less than 20 minutes. Kyle stared straight ahead, navigating the treacherous nighttime waters with a singular blinding focus. He could not lose his father. Not to Victor Newman's petty corporate vendettas, and certainly not to Patty Williams's madness. The boat violently slammed against the swelling waves, sending jolts of pain up their spines, but no one complained. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the agony of imagining what Jack was enduring. As they closed in on the coordinates, the fog began to lift, revealing the jagged silhouette of a secluded cove. And there, anchored in the dead center of the dark glassy water, was the Times Sea Siren Asterisk. It was a massive opulent vessel, glowing with soft ambient lights that reflected off the black water like scattered diamonds. It looked peaceful, serene, a luxury getaway. But to Diane it looked like a floating coffin. "Cut the engines," Billy ordered softly. "We drift in from here. We don't know if Patty is armed or if Victor left any guards behind." Kyle killed the motor. The sudden silence was deafening, save for the gentle lapping of the water against the hull. They grabbed the oars, silently paddling the remaining distance until their smaller boat bumped gently against the yacht's swim platform. Diane was the first to move. Before Kyle or Billy could stop her, she scrambled onto the teak deck of the yacht, her movements fueled by a desperate primal need to protect her husband. She crept up the starboard stairs, her wet shoes making virtually no sound. The air was thick with the scent of saltwater and expensive cologne, Jack's cologne. "Mom, wait," Kyle hissed, trailing closely behind her with Billy flanking them. Diane ignored him. She pressed her back against the sleek fiberglass wall of the main cabin, her heart thrashing in her chest like a trapped bird. She edged toward the large floor-to-ceiling glass doors that led into the yacht's luxurious saloon. The heavy velvet curtains were partially drawn, leaving a narrow gap of visibility. Taking a deep, trembling breath, Diane peeked through the glass. What she expected to see was a nightmare. Jack tied to a chair, bruised, bloodied, fighting for his life against a deranged captor. She expected to see Patty wielding a weapon, screaming lost in one of her psychotic breaks. What she actually saw made the breath leave her lungs in a sharp, agonizing rush. The interior of the saloon was bathed in the warm golden glow of a crystal chandelier. Soft, romantic jazz music drifted through the air, barely audible through the thick glass. And there in the center of the room stood Jack Abbott. He was not tied up. He was not bleeding. He was holding Patty Williams in a deep, intimate embrace. Diane's hands flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her eyes widened in absolute horror and disbelief. Jack's arms were wrapped securely around Patty's waist, his face buried in her blonde hair. Patty was gazing up at him, her eyes shining with tears of pure, unadulterated adoration, her hands resting softly on his chest. "Jack." Diane whispered the word, tasting like ash on her tongue. She watched paralyzed as Jack pulled back slightly, looking deeply into Patty's eyes. He reached up his fingers, gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind Patty's ear. His lips moved, speaking words Diane couldn't hear, but the tenderness in his expression was unmistakable. It was the same look he gave Diane when they were alone in their bedroom at the Abbott mansion. It was a look of profound, soulful affection. A wave of nausea washed over Diane. The world tilted on its axis. Asterisk. No. This isn't real. This is a trick. Asterisk. But as she continued to watch, the horrifying reality of the situation began to crystallize in her mind. Jack wasn't brainwashed. He wasn't under a spell. She could see the rigid tension in his shoulders, the slight, almost imperceptible clenching of his jaw. He was acting. He was playing a part. Diane's heartbreak instantly morphed into a sickening realization. Jack was using Patty. He was manipulating her fragile, shattered psyche, playing into her deepest, most desperate delusions of their past love in order to orchestrate a complex escape. He was seducing his captor to survive. While the logical part of Diane's brain understood the sheer necessity of survival, the visceral emotional impact of seeing her husband holding another woman, a woman who had caused their family so much pain, was a devastating blow. It felt like a profound betrayal. The intimacy between them, however manufactured, looked too real, too practiced. It brought back every insecurity Diane had ever harbored about her place in Jack's life. Kyle bumped into her from behind, peering over her shoulder. "Mom, what is it? Do you see him?" Kyle's voice hitched as he caught sight of the scene inside. "What the hell is he doing?" Kyle whispered, his voice laced with confusion and disgust. "He's surviving," Billy muttered darkly, stepping up beside them. He's playing her. It's a classic hostage tactic. Keep the captor calm. Make them trust you. By making love to her, Diane choked out tears, finally spilling over her lashes hot and angry. Look at them, Billy. He's not just keeping her calm, he's breaking her mind all over again. Diane couldn't take it anymore. The sight of Jack stroking Patty's cheek was a knife twisting in her gut. Ignoring Billy's frantic gestures to wait, Diane reached out and violently slid the heavy glass door open. It banged against the track with a loud echoing crack. Inside the saloon, Jack and Patty sprang apart. Jack shouted, his eyes wide, with a mixture of profound relief and immediate terrifying panic. Patty spun around, her expression, contorting from blissful serenity to sheer murderous rage in a fraction of a second. You, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Diane. What are you doing here? This is our honeymoon. You ruin everything, Diane. You always ruin everything. Patty, no, listen to me, Jack interjected, stepping between the two women. His voice was smooth, placating, but his eyes were darting frantically toward the table, where a heavy brass statue sat a potential weapon. Patty, sweetheart, look at me. Focus on me. Diane flinched at the word times sweetheart asterisk. The endearment felt like a physical slap to the face. She stepped fully into the room, Kyle and Billy flanking her like bodyguards. It's over, Patty, Kyle said, his voice firm and authoritative. We're taking my father home. You need to step away from him. Patty backed away, her hands clutching her head as a guttural sob ripped from her throat. She looked at Jack, her eyes wide and pleading, resembling a terrified wounded animal. Jack, tell them, we belong together. You said you loved me. You just said it. Jack looked at Patty, then at Diane. The silence in the room was suffocating. Diane stared at her husband, her eyes begging him to deny it, begging him to explain that it was all just a desperate ruse. But Jack's face was a mask of agony. He couldn't just flip a switch. He had spent days carefully weaving a web of lies to keep Patty from killing him, and undoing it now could trigger a lethal explosion. Patty, Jack said softly, taking a step toward her, his hands raised in surrender. I did what I had to do. You were keeping me here against my will. Victor used you. The truth hit Patty like a physical blow. The delusion shattered, leaving nothing but the raw, bleeding reality of her broken mind. You lied, she whispered, her voice cracking. You lied to me. You were using me, just like Victor, just like everyone. Jack, get away from her, Billy yelled, lunging forward. Chaos erupted. Patty grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the bar, hurling it blindly at Diane. It smashed against the bulkhead, showering them in a spray of amber liquor and sharp shards. Kyle tackled Patty, pinning her arms to her sides as she thrashed and screamed, her wails echoing into the night like a siren. Jack rushed to Diane, grabbing her by the shoulders. Diane, are you hurt? Are you okay? Diane pulled away from his grasp, the physical distance mirroring the sudden, vast emotional chasm that had opened between them. Don't touch me, she breathed, her voice shaking. Diane, please, Jack pleaded, his eyes filled with a desperate need for her to understand. It wasn't real. None of it was real. I had to keep her docile. She had a gun, Diane. She was going to sink the boat with both of us on it. I know, Diane said, her voice dropping to a hollow whisper. I know you did what you had to do to survive. But seeing you like that, holding her, looking at her the way you look at me. She closed her eyes, a tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. You used her, Jack. You played with a sick woman's mind to save yourself, and I don't know how to unsee that. The rescue, which should have been a moment of triumphant reunion, felt entirely like a defeat. As Billy and Kyle dragged a sobbing, broken Patty off the yacht, Jack and Diane stood in the wreckage of the saloon. The physical danger had passed thanks to Nikki Newman's unexpected intervention, but a new insidious threat had taken its place. The yacht rocked gently on the water, but the foundation of Jack and Diane's marriage had suffered a seismic shift. The air between them was thick with suspicion, hurt, and the heavy burden of exposed secrets. Jack had survived Victor's twisted game, but as he looked into his wife's guarded, traumatized eyes, he realized the true cost of his survival had yet to be paid. The journey back to Genoa City would be cold, dark, and fraught with the silent, chaotic emotions of a couple who had just stared into the abyss, only to find that the darkness had followed them home.